60 Minutes with Angela starts right now.
All over the world, there is fear. And what is this fear based on? To my mind, the fear is both economic and cultural. Economic in the sense that globalization has made a nonsense out of national economies. You can't really plan to be prosperous forever. The competition is from everywhere and anywhere.
Yes.
At the same time, you see your culture, inverted comma, under attack by new people moving in, new people with newer skills doing what you may not even be qualified to do.
Well, hello and welcome. This is 60 Minutes with me, Angela Ajetumobi. Thank you for joining me on the program today. And so all over the world, countries are shifting from what we know as civic nationalism, which is positive, to that which is negative, perhaps a romantic and exclusive belief in race and tradition as the foundation for belonging to a nation. The question is, why are countries suddenly looking on the world with mistrust and distrust? Now we know that an exclusive, ethnically based nationalism is on the rise everywhere in the world, including here in Nigeria. In rich countries, they use this nationalism to win votes. In the poorer countries, what we like to call the developing countries, they use this nationalism to keep their citizens in check when questions arise about how well government is performing, about poverty, and even sometimes food. And so when the new British Prime Minister, Theresa May, says, I'm quoting her now, if you believe you're a citizen of the world, you are a citizen of nowhere. You don't even understand what the word citizenship means, end of quote. What does she mean by that? And that's where my host today comes in, Dr. DAYO AYOADE of the Department of Jurisprudence and International Law. He's an associate professor specializing in oil and gas law and international law. Together, we'll be looking at the rise of nationalism all over the world. So, join me after the break. I'm counting down 60 minutes with Dr. DAYO AYOADE, Associate Professor from the Faculty of Law, University of Lagos. That's in the southwest geopolitical zone of Nigeria. Welcome back. Welcome, Dr. AYOADE. Thank you very much for coming on 60 Minutes with me today.
You're welcome.
Someone explained nationalism using these words: a cheap and easy way to generate enthusiasm for the state and deflect blame for what is wrong. In other words, when your people begin to ask questions about freedom or their lack of it, about food, about not having what Italians call la dolce vita, the good life, then you whip up these tactics with nationalism and use that to deflect attention from your failures as a leader. Do you agree with that assertion?
Yes, of course. I mean, we do see it all over the world where people have concerns about maybe migration, concerns about food, concerns about infrastructure, concerned about their life and their lifestyle, or perhaps even a deteriorating lifestyle. Politician comes to you and reassures you through nationalism, all is fine. It's those filthy foreigners, those migrants, those people are your enemies. They're the ones taking away your rightful share of what we provided for you. It's not as if we did not provide it for you. We did provide it for you, but they're stealing it away from you. They're taking it over. They're not just consuming their share, they're taking even more than their share. And that's where you're not receiving your fair dues. So don't blame us. It's those people, it's those foreigners, it's those immigrants. They're the cause of your concern.
And you know the funny thing is, when people say the immigrants are taking the jobs, the truth is that these are the jobs that the citizens of these countries would never touch with a barge pole. And they're the lowest of the lowest jobs that the immigrants come to do. I'm wondering what will happen if we get rid of all these immigrants from all the countries in Europe. Who will do the dirty jobs?
That's actually an interesting question and comment, because what you'd find is that, as you rightly point out, immigrants don't have a choice. You would find that actually some of them, the jobs they do are not commensurate with their qualification or even their lifestyles back in their countries. But they say beggars cannot be choosers. So when they go to a new country, maybe they are fleeing a war zone or fleeing oppression, fleeing threat of death or what have you. They feel they must do something to survive. They feel they must try to build up a new home and provide for their families. That allows them to take up opportunities or jobs that usually people who are from that country would never accept. They are the low-paying jobs. You're picking the fruits in the countryside, working on the farms, cleaning jobs, even at less than the minimum wage, the official minimum wage. They accept also dirty jobs, risky jobs, factory jobs that most people will not find convenient, and certainly they will not accept the salaries. So when the migrants come in and do all this dirty work, we tend to underestimate the work they do. Some of them do 2 or 3 jobs just to survive, just to get enough money in a day. If you suddenly remove them, the way Donald Trump says, "Oh, I will send people packing, I will send back 10 million migrants," whatever. Who now does the job? Who picks your fruits? Who works on your farms? Who takes care of your kids? So some of these people are doing our pairs, nannies, at sometimes less than the minimum wage. So there will be some kind of economic crunch that I think those nations will experience, if it's even possible to expel all these so-called, whether it's illegal migrants or refugees or whatever you want to call them.
I was reading someone who said the pitch, the selling of nationalism only succeeds for a while. If these leaders who have sold nationalism do not succeed, that is, if they don't improve on the poverty, they don't provide the jobs that they thought they promised their people, there will be a backlash. Because your promises are based on these things that you've said. And having said them, you've been president or prime minister now for 2 years, things haven't improved. Do you agree with that? That it may cause a backlash if prosperity does not come as a result of selling that nationalism?
I think that's actually the biggest danger of selling nationalism. It's a very short-sighted, poorly managed tactic to get lots of people on your side. Inevitably, you will disappoint them. Inevitably, you will have to reverse yourself, because many of your promises will just not be achievable. I give you a promise now that I'm going to expel millions of illegal migrants and refugees. The actual mechanics of sending people out of the country, and don't forget, other migrants are also arriving, and refugees are arriving as well, almost on a weekly basis. As you're trying to push some out, some are also coming in. The odds of being able to actually do that is actually very, very poor. Economically, a lot of the world is now integrated. It's a global economy. All these promises you are making, have you put in perspective the fact that there's a global crisis on, economic crisis? Your country is not going to be a prosperous island in the middle of this raging storm.
If it's isolated.
Because we're all linked. The economy is linked. Your factory is producing something, a component. Other factories in other countries are producing components of something that all together perhaps make up a car, or a computer, or a laptop, or whatever. But the point is that you don't do it by yourself. Those days are over. So you don't have total control. Nationalism is all very well and good, but after a while, people look around and say, what have we seen? Where is the improvement?
Yes.
The improvement could be slow in coming. The improvement may not even come. And then the horrible backlash could provide very terrible conditions. It could provide what we actually are afraid of,
Yes.
revolution, when the entire economic, political, social, cultural class is
Yes.
essentially discredited. Democracy itself will become discredited. And that's why politicians have to be extremely careful about making promises and this blame game,
Yes.
where we look at those who are different from us, perhaps different color of their skin, different religion or different culture, and say these are the causes of our problems. These are things are a bit more complex than that. It's not as simple as that. But politicians like simple messages.
Yes, and that suits them right. Okay, so people think that this rise in nationalism only came with the campaign of the newly elected Donald J. Trump as President of the United States. But students of history, students of international law like yourself, have been speaking about this rise through many countries that many people don't even know about. Britain, for instance, voting to exit the EU, was based on a kind of nationalism. People blaming immigrants, especially those from Eastern Europe, as the cause of problems within Britain. But we've seen since then that yes, Theresa May is now Prime Minister. They haven't actually exited EU yet, but the value of the pound has dropped by about 16% against the dollar. And yet, a lot of British people have no regrets about leaving the EU. They say, they feel that no matter what, they're happy to leave the EU.
Brexit, of course, came before Donald Trump's election in the United States.
Yes.
Brexit has the same hallmarks of this ethnic nationalism, fear for the future, fear for prosperity, this concern about immigration, losing control. We're no longer in charge of our destiny.
Taking our country back. Back from whom?
Well, that's the thing, because the politicians that promoted Brexit said the European Union has taken away all our powers. The national government is effectively rudderless. They have no powers to actually affect our lives, our daily lives anymore. The only way we can get this power back is by exiting the European Union. Once we do this, everything will become perfect. For instance, £350 million extra for the national NHS, National Health Service, better infrastructure, less migrants. We can close our doors to these refugees, and certainly the migrants from Eastern Europe will certainly be sent packing.
Yes.
And this, of course, will allow you to get the wonderful jobs that you deserve, instead of these people coming here, stealing our jobs, crowding our hospitals, crowding our schools, crowding our infrastructure. This is a crowded island. We don't want so many people here. We barely have enough for ourselves.
Yes.
But as you point out, what has happened is this drop in the value of the pound. The pound sterling's performance is one of the worst performing currencies in the world, comparable to the Nigerian naira.
Right now?
Yes, as well as the Azerbaijani menat. Pound sterling has shown the uncertainty of Brexit, the problems with actually exiting, has translated into more economic woes. Yes, there's been some kind of awakening where people said, hang on, we didn't vote for this. We didn't know it would be this bad.
Yes.
Because no analysis was done. No true difficult questions were asked. That if we actually Brexit, what would it mean? 6 months after the Brexit referendum, we're still substantially in the same position. There's no clarity. In fact, it's becoming a problem because the European Union is afraid, because the uncertainty will weaken their institutions. The uncertainty is weakening global markets, because if you don't know where to invest, you don't know what's going to happen. Now, would I go to Britain now and set up my brand new factory? I'd be cautious, because the reason why I'd set up my new car factory in the United Kingdom is that once I set it up there, free of all customs dues, I can sell my car throughout the European Union.
Yes.
Now, there's a big question mark on that. So people, those companies, international companies, that have made substantial investments, whether in Jaguar or the car manufacturers and different industries, I'm now rather concerned that what will be the impact on our bottom line? Because the UK market can't consume all the cars that we produced. They are meant to be also exported around to Germany, to France, to Eastern Europe, and what have you. Now, what will happen to us? So everybody's holding on to their investments.
Before we go to all the other countries, you know, France and Poland and Hungary, the nationalism, the rise of it, my research shows a certain trend. Those who promote it employ similar language. They cater to the nostalgia, you know, in the good old days, kind of thing. They express an anxiety about all these immigrants here, and you know, the future is uncertain. They have apathy towards globalization and the liberal international order. They poo-poo that, and, you know, like Theresa May says, if you're a citizen of the world, you're a citizen of nowhere. They lament the decline of what they call a good people. In other words, their people have been corrupted with these people coming, and they want to make their country great again. We saw that with Donald Trump's message. But are you surprised, though, that this nationalism, we're even seeing it in our country, Nigeria?
The base is different all over the world. If you look at the US and Europe, what we're looking at is this ethnic or white nationalism versus multiculturalism, Islamophobia and what have you, bringing in outsiders versus insiders. In the good old days, when all these people were not around, all was well with us, we were perfect, we had great jobs, well-paying jobs. But since multiculturalism, since globalization, our jobs have been exported, and now we don't have anything. And we proud factory workers, we proud engineers have nothing to do. We're all sitting on the dole. We're all asking for social security. On one hand. Then you go to the developing countries where that nationalism is also a reversal. In good old days. Before the British arrived, we were ruling ourselves.
We had ethnic nations.
We had ethnic nations, and all was well with us. From this part of the world, I'm proud to be Hausa or Yoruba or whatever you want to call it.
I'm Yoruba first before being Nigerian.
Nigerian, because it's an artificial construct. So it's also going back to the past, some kind of nostalgia that we are proud people who rule themselves. Why on earth are we lumped together with people who don't have a clue as to decent behavior? So it all goes to that, the behavior, standards of well-being, and economic stress. But in a developing country, it's perhaps a bit even worse because the institutions are not strong, the nation states are rather wobbly, and it just takes a bit of a push and shove, and there's chaos everywhere. And that's why this nationalism, when you translate it to Africa, it tends to be a lot more chaotic. If you say you want to reverse the boundaries, you could create easily centuries of war. So we have to be extremely careful. The world has to be very careful. People have to actually understand. Most people, they don't understand history. They don't understand whether it's international law or the problems of the new order. The current global order, from the United Nations downwards to even regionalization, like the European Union. In Nigeria, we have ECOWAS. In the southern regions of Africa, we have SADC. We have these new regional bodies. There was a different ways to downplay nationalism. Don't worry so much about your country. Be big-hearted. Be a citizen of the world. Be a citizen of your larger region. Open your heart to others. Learn to live with others. Respect people regardless of their race, their religion, and what have you. Now we see a terrible and fierce backlash. And where is that backlash going to take us? And that's the problem. Because when you open Pandora's box, that's probably the easiest part. We can't put it back. Donald Trump has opened a box that he will struggle to shut, and perhaps nobody can shut it. Whether it's you go to Italy, you go to France, the same concerns are there. You go to Austria, these concerns are also there. We open this box. We're saying for once in a very long time, there's this issue of Christendom. We are Christians. We do this, and we have these people, Muslims and what have you, telling us we cannot do what we like in our own country. It's gone all too far. Let them go back to their countries so we can reclaim our heritage and live the way we want to live and do what we like in our own country. So it's a very complex stew pot. But politicians, like tell us that, oh, it's also simple. Your enemy is XYZ.
Yes.
You find that even if you expel them and you have nobody else to blame,
Yes.
your conditions will not substantially improve and they may even worsen.
Join us again after the break.
Nice question.
Angela, that's a great question.
It's a good question.
It is difficult to respond to that question.
That is a serious question. Angela, that is a very great question. Great question, Angela.
You know, Angela, that's a very difficult question.
That's a great question, Angela.
Okay, that's a great question.
Angela, that's a tough one for me.
That's a good question. Good question.
I love to ask questions. I think it's what I do best. You see, I think that the fastest way to learn anything is to ask questions. The right questions that help you get to the heart of the matter.
60 Minutes with Angela. Again, answers to every question you always wanted to ask.
Welcome back. If you've just joined us, it's 60 Minutes with me, Angela Ajetomobi. On my hot seat today, Dr. DAYO AYOADE, an Associate Professor of International Law from the Faculty of Law at the University of Lagos. We do know about the rise of Marine Le Pen in France. Yes, she hasn't actually said, like Trump, that she would expel Muslims, but we're seeing her campaign, so if France leaves the EU, will that not be the end of the EU as we know it?
Well, Marine Le Pen, a young lady that took over from her father, is also riding the nationalist horse, encouraging this view of France, this nostalgic view from the 50s, and
Yes.
where migration was not such a problem, globalization was not such a problem,
Yes.
and the European Union is to blame. She was so happy about Brexit. If France leaves the European Union, if I was a betting person, I'd say that could be the end of the European Union. Because Britain leaving is an incredible body blow. Britain is one of the largest economies,
Yes.
second largest contributor to the
In-
European
in
Union after
EU.
Germany.
Yes.
Now, if you remove the contributions of Britain, I think Germany contributes something like $14 billion or so. Britain's about $12 billion. France about $5 or $6 billion. You can see that huge gap.
Yes.
Financially, all these contributors will have to beef up their contributions to make up the shortfall from Brexit. That's why Brexit is going to be such a big problem, and why the negotiators of the European Union will want to tie in Britain for a while to continue paying.
Yes.
Meanwhile, Theresa May and the Brexiters will say, look, we're out. We don't want to pay anything. The whole point of leaving you so that we don't have to pay you, so we can use the money for our own purposes. So we will have this struggle ahead, this huge struggle. If France should vote Marine Le Pen, then there will be a whole process of leaving. But it will be a bit more also as complex as Brexit. France leaving, Frexit, if you want to call it
Yes,
that,
Brexit.
will be perhaps more difficult because France has a written constitution, and then you have to go according to the constitution. The constitution leaving the European Union will be a lot more difficult than the unwritten constitution that
Britain
operates.
And does it matter about currency? Remember that Britain never adopted the euro, but France did.
It is helpful because it means that Britain is not as tied in terms of this monetary policy, in terms of the eurozone. Because Britain is not tied in, it's incredibly complicated to unwind the affairs of Britain from the European Union.
They're finding out that now. That
Yes.
it won't be that easy to just cut the ties.
Yes, it's not a simple thing, but that's why the argument is, do we have hard Brexit or soft Brexit? Hard Brexit, cut the umbilical cord, you're on your own. Soft Brexit, there was some kind of interrelationship. You can't have lived with a partner for decades and then
Yes.
suddenly cut the cord. It doesn't
Yes.
work that way.
Yes.
France is even worse because France is really integrated. The engine room of the European Union, the actual engine room of the European Union is actually Germany and France. Britain has always been fenced out. We've always
Yes.
been the man looking in out of through the window.
Yes.
And that's the fact that France and Germany are the true engine has always clouded Britain's view of the European Union.
Yes.
But now, if France now wants to leave the European Union, who will step up to play that role for France? There's no other country comparable.
Yes.
It's certainly not Italy, the sick man of Europe. It's not Spain. It's not Ireland.
Yes.
All of these countries are economically deficient in many ways. So I can see there been a lot of trouble ahead. Should France vote for Marine Le Pen, I know she would strongly push for a referendum and an exit. I think that would be totally disastrous for the European Union and regionalization generally.
Yes.
So this push which we've had since 1945 with the New World Order that was created post the Second World War, it starts to unravel. And when you start to unravel institutions, then you create the potential for chaos, the potential for uncertainty, and the potential for disaster, whether it's economic, whether it's military, whether it's social, whether it's cultural.
You know, sometimes some of the leaders are hardline.
Yes.
But, you know, like Marine Le Pen, listening to Nicolas Sarkozy, former president of France, who is considered central-right, he also now employing some of that rhetoric in his campaign. You do know he's trying to get back into office.
Yes.
And he's talking about how people who can't eat pork in our schools should learn to have an extra serving of chips rather than pork. We've also seen the Prime Minister of Hungary come out categorically to say, if you can't eat our food in our country, go back to where you're coming from. In fact, we don't want you here because your values are different from our values. So I suppose my question is, can we blame these hardliners who are fighting to take their country back? Because even I, sometimes, I'm shocked that immigrants will move to a new country, and the minute they get their papers, they start to make demands. Before you emigrated to France or to London, you knew they ate pork. You knew that pork was a major part of their lives. Why would you emigrate there? Your children are in school there, and demand that pork be taken off the menu. Isn't that enough to rile, you know, citizens of any country and say, how dare you?
I can understand the concern. People have centuries of culinary traditions that suddenly you want to overturn. But that's kind of like a populist example of where we talk about pork. It's a very emotive example because this actually involves Islamophobia and all the quarrel with this clash of civilizations, if you like, which some people have referred to. Well, you see, even in France, with the central right, Sarkozy has been jettisoned. His views of using migration to push his own personal agenda has been jettisoned. That's why Francois Fillon has won. So it will be Francois Fillon's agenda or his view of France against Marine Le Pen's view of France. And that's why the European Union will be praying and hoping that it is Fillon that wins, because of course we know what will happen if Marine Le Pen wins. This concern that migrants are too demanding, not grateful, and
not ready to
adjust, to integrate.
Assimilate,
yes, they don't want to integrate and assimilate in the culture where they found themselves, because it's certainly concerning, and it's time that migrants were told categorically before you go for your citizenship, whether oaths or ceremony or whatever. You're told categorically, this is who we are. This is who you and your children will become if you stay here. There is no other way. You can't hold on to your traditions and use your traditions to overturn what centuries of our own tradition. We have a lot of alarmist things in tabloids in Europe about how extremist preachers will preach about how Sharia law is superior to the constitution of the country where they live. That's enough to rile anybody. Because if your country was that conducive, you wouldn't have fled.
You could have stayed in your country and practice your Sharia law there.
And your religion, and you're happy there. And even if your country is not suitable, there are many, many countries with your similar ideology and religion. You might as well have gone to those countries. Why didn't you go to those countries that have similar cultural and religious background as you? That would have been easier for you. But you insisted and you desired to come to Europe. Having gotten here, you wish to change our rules, our norms, our culture, our social attitudes. No, that will not work. Swimming, the challenges in courts. Girls should not swim with boys. Segregation of the sexes. In Europe, sexes are not segregated. And the fear is that once you start this segregation, where does it end? And if everybody with their different religions comes to impose it on their country in Europe, then they wouldn't have a country anymore. And that's the fear.
And we've seen a backlash against Angela Merkel in
Yes.
Germany, who graciously allowed a lot of refugees to come in, I think about 800,000 or so refugees. And then we saw what happened, I think, on New Year's Eve or at the city center, you know, where migrants descended and attacked girls who were in normal European dress,
yes.
shorts, and they felt justified in attacking these girls because they thought the girls have exposed themselves. Well, that is the culture in Europe. If you know that you're offended by exposed skin,
Yes.
why did you emigrate to that country?
I think that's why I think cultural classes are very important. Culture, and it's not just for a week or two.
Yes.
They need to be immersed in the history, traditions, and culture of where they are. And if you want to migrate or if you want to be a refugee,
Yes.
you must be able to understand where you are. And if you cannot understand where you are, there will be cultural clashes. And it is this kind of attacks on young ladies and attacks on maybe people drinking, which I call it an integral tradition in Europe.
Yes.
You cannot say we cannot drink. France, wine is
It's a way of
that's
life.
French.
Yes.
It's a French way of life. It's something that I think those migrants will have to be careful of. Of course, when we say migrants, I mean we're talking about a fringe minority, a very small group of people that are giving others a very bad name,
Yes.
very bad reputation. But it's going to affect everybody because out of 800,000 people, it's not as if
800,000
people attacked people, attacked girls. It's not even up to 1,000 people.
Yes.
It's not even, I don't think, up to 500 people.
No.
So if 20 people out of 800,000 is minuscule, it's absolutely minuscule. But
Yeah.
when it's going to be sold by the nationalists, by the right-wing press,
Yes.
by the tabloids, is that, oh, look at these monsters, these very common animals coming from their country to impose their will on us and rape, despoil, and injure our decent children.
Yes.
And that's where the fight starts from, because they're going to use the action of less than 10 people or so to color almost 1 million people. Really, you can't think it's fair. If a migrant steals an apple, his face will be on the newspapers, they're thieves.
All of them.
They're all thieves. But
Yes.
what about all the migrants who are contributing by working so hard and paying lots of taxes? Nobody puts their faces on the newspaper.
We've heard about Poland, the Law and Justice Party there is preaching the same thing. Hungary, we now have ultra-nationalist leaders, they call them, and they don't hide their xenophobia. Even in Austria, we have the Freedom Party, whose leader, Norbert Hofer, could win what they call a largely ceremonial presidency. China, where they say if you are not from the Han,
Yeah, nobody.
you are nobody. We also have India. Narendra Modi, who many people viewed as not far right or far left, has suddenly been revealed to have links with groups who promote chauvinism and things like that. So all over the world, we are seeing this. What do you think is the cause, the single most important cause of this rise in nationalism?
The fear, and first so Austria and the Freedom Party.
Yes.
I think at least the European Union were quite worried about that, but luckily they lost the election, and
Yes.
therefore that fear has been depressed a bit now.
A bit.
The party has not gone away. The right wing has not gone away. All over the world there is fear. And what is this fear based on? To my mind, the fear is both economic and cultural. Economic in the sense that globalization has made a nonsense out of national economies. You can't really plan to be prosperous forever. The competition is from everywhere and anywhere.
Yes.
At the same time, you see your culture, inverted comma, under attack by new people moving in, new people with newer skills doing what you may not even be qualified to do. Give an example. In London at the moment, there are 1 million European Union citizens who are not British.
Yes.
In London alone. That's why you talk about London as a global city.
Yes.
So it's very amusing when Theresa May says about a global citizenship.
Yeah, yes.
You know, it's ridiculous. They are global citizens from the point of view that they are comfortable living with, working with, and associating with people from different parts of the world. It's not all going to happen overnight. Look at what happened even in London in the election of the mayor, where Goldsmith was trying to undermine Khan by saying, oh, he's a Muslim, and you basically bring terrorism to London. It's ridiculous. And the London voters emphatically rejected this Islamophobia, racism. They flung him out. And you see, yes, politicians will always try to exploit where there are difficulties, where there is misunderstanding, because they themselves have no solutions. So they want to ride on the back of the nationalism tiger. But sooner or later, they're going to follow that tiger because they can't control it. And that's the danger to the rest of us. I think people have to be sensible, not to look and believe all they read or accept from politicians, that your cause of your concerns is not always about that new family moving in from Eastern Europe.
Stranger.
In Nigeria, we're having the same problem. In India, nationalism is an issue. All over the world, nationalism, I want to be by myself. I want to be rich and prosperous alone. These strangers, even though there are also people from your own country sometimes. In Nigeria, our problem hasn't been people moving in from Ghana anymore. The problem has been people say, I want to be by myself and do it my own way. So there are different elements and different perspectives to this nationalism.
Join us again after the break.
Nice question.
Angela, that's a great question.
It's a good question.
It is difficult to respond to that question.
That is a serious question.
Angela, that is a very great question.
Great question, Angela. You know, Angela, that's a very difficult question.
That's a great question, Angela.
Okay, that's a great question.
Angela, that's a tough one for me.
That's a good question. Good question.
I love to ask questions. I think it's what I do best. You see, I think that the fastest way to learn anything is to ask questions. The right questions that help you get to the heart of the matter.
60 Minutes with Angela. Again, answers to every question you always wanted to ask.
Welcome back. My concluding moments now with Associate Professor DAYO AYOADE from the University of Lagos's Faculty of Law. Just something you said now. I want to be on my own. I want to be by myself. I've always thought about the question of self-determination. Yes, the United Nations recognizes the right of a people to self-determine, but where do we place that vis-a-vis those who think that trying to self-determine is like committing treason? You are trying to secede. How do we reconcile the two? How can we say people can self-determine if they're going to be removing themselves from the entity that we call Nigeria, for example?
I think the whole problem has to be, why do people want to break away? Why do they want to be by themselves or self-determined and so forth? Competition for scarce resources. It boils down again to economics, culture, what have you. That competition for scarce resources are much worse in the developing world. And because it's much worse in the developing world, the issue of secession in the developing world has potential for even more chaos. If you look at what's happening, say, in Africa versus what's happening in Europe, we also have parts of France that want to secede. We have parts of Spain, of Italy, that would, northern Italy would be the most prosperous, would be very, very prosperous nation if they can jettison off the southern part of Italy. We also have the fact that there are parts of Spain that will be incredibly wealthy because a lot of power is and financial wealth is in that part of the country. If they jettison, if you look at Barcelona and so forth, go away from Madrid and be by themselves. Now, I don't think that's the answer, or at least the answer that politicians should push. You can self-determine within your country. There are constitutional mechanisms that would allow you to create your freedoms within your own country and not result in the chaos of saying, I want to be by myself. Let's go to the Middle East, which is the chaotic part of the world. Because we have them in Iraq, we have them in Turkey, we have them in several countries. If the Kurds in one country become an independent nation, I can promise you the Kurds in the other countries will fight to the finish
to become independent too.
As well, and join their brothers.
All right.
That would destroy essentially 4 countries. So the war will be a 4-way war. Where does it end? That's why sometimes we have to accept these borders, these artificial borders that were drawn during colonial times. We have to accept them. So the fight is not really about nationalism at the end of the day.
Yes.
It's about that fear of other people. Is that competition for scarce resources? Is that fear of today and also the fear of tomorrow? Because people feel they're becoming poorer and poorer. So that's why you find people voting for Trump. 75% of those who vote for Trump, you find they will be from the small towns, the rural, the countryside.
Yes.
That's where his power base is. Those who are threatened by globalization, they want to be isolated. Isolationism, protectionism against globalization forces.
Yes.
They want to be cocooned and protected against the real world.
But is that possible?
No. Unfortunately for them.
All right. Putin is embracing Russian Slavic traditions with a mix of Orthodox Christianity. He's happy with Trump because that's the kind of message he is also preaching. We also have in Turkey, Erdogan is shunning the EU as well. He's also shunning peace talks with the Kurdish minority. You talked about the Kurds earlier on. Now he favors the powerful type of Islamic nationalism. So we're seeing all these flavors of nationalism rise up across the world. Are we then saying that people should not emigrate? Is this a roundabout message to anyone who's trying to leave his country to another? You know, to rather stay in your country and try and develop it to the best that it can be, rather than emigrate to another country where you will not only be deemed to be a stranger, but you will be treated in a hostile manner.
I think that's what's going to happen, unfortunately, in the end. These people who are scared for their own future, scared for the future of their children, they might employ violence, hostility, chaos as a way of driving people off. For people in developing countries especially who migrate, go through a lot of difficulties to migrate, walk through the Sahara Desert, cross the Mediterranean. I mean,
some die on the way.
Lots die. I think we don't really know the actual numbers. Lots die. And some of these people are not actually refugees in the political sense. They are economic migrants. Everybody wants what's best for themselves and their children. But we find that these poor economic migrants will raise maybe $10,000, $20,000 for this journey. Whether from Asia
I've always
or
wondered,
Africa.
if you can raise $10,000 to make the journey, why don't you just invest that $10,000?
That's the difficult. That's the problem, and that's the chaos that we face. If you have, say, $10,000-$20,000 surely that's enough to start up a little business
in your country
to sustain you. But what you also find is that because these countries are so hostile to business, so chaotic, they are not well run. They would rather take their chances and gamble, spend that $20,000 to reach another country where there's stability. Give us an example for poor countries. A lot of the wealth of poor countries are wealth that cannot be accessed because you have land but you cannot borrow with it. If you buy land today, 20 different claimants will turn up tomorrow to fight over that same land. So when you have $20,000, does it make sense for you to buy some land that many people will come out of nowhere to snatch from you because rule of law does not exist? It's only a desire to live in a peaceful, calm environment where governed by the rule of law that pushes this migration. So the message for other countries is that do your own rules, have some rules. You don't have a system, the corruption that allows local governments to keep coming to overtax and take away all the money from small businesses because these small businesses don't have a voice. They don't have anyone to protect them. So if you can fix small things in your country, you can find that prosperity would come just by fixing those things. Prosperity is not only about selling oil or crude oil or finding crude oil or finding gold under your ground or even in agriculture. It makes me laugh when I read a lot of things now that, if only we farm more, Nigeria will become prosperous. That's a lie. The food security will improve, yes, but the country itself will not become more prosperous because most of these things can't be sold for any real amount of money in the international markets. How much is cocoa being sold for per ton? What you need to do is to add value to whatever you produce, eat what you produce, and then start to manufacture, to create things and build things
All right, let's go back to America now, because we know that Donald Trump is waiting to be inaugurated. Reading the influential Huffington Post, Alex Mojaher, he said a federal court could invalidate Trump's win and legally install Hillary Clinton as president with the CIA's conclusion that Russia worked covertly to help Trump to win that election. Because you're an expert in international law, I'm asking you, is that likely to happen?
It's very unlikely. I think the liberal blogs and websites are trying to push for the recount or what have you. It's not going to happen.
Are you saying it won't happen because it has never happened before?
It's very unlikely because the constitutional implications, the legal implications, we're so fraught with difficulty to undermine democracy itself. Now, I understand why maybe the Republicans are trying to pretend that the so-called Russian or Putin interference in the election was not as serious as been alleged by the Democrats. By
I like
the
the
CIA.
word you use, pretend.
Yes, because what you find is that if America should conclusively find that democracy has been undermined by a strong man from outside the country, that has serious geopolitical implications for not only America-Russia relations, but for the whole world. It's something that could result in war.
Are you saying that because America is the beacon for democracy, and so if we all see all over the world that even America can't manage its own democracy?
Precisely. It can create the ramifications of it. The repercussions will be under Pandora's box we can never close. It will cause more harm than good. If you look at what happened between Gore and Bush Jr. about recounts, it was clear that Gore won, but for the sake of the nation, Gore accepted defeat, and that was the end of it. If you look at even Brexit, I read comments recently whereby an MP alleged that they should look closely, that did Russia help manipulate Brexit? That Brexit maybe have been the result of Russian manipulation. Don't forget we talk about 52%.
Yes.
And a bit of a surprise result as well, because the political class as a whole did not think Brexit was going to happen.
Yes.
But what they forgot is that the so-called ordinary people, the people who have been left behind in the prosperity, are so willing to punch the elites on the nose. They would vote for people that, even though they don't agree totally with their views, maybe their racist views or their controversial views, they'd vote for them as to show the elites.
Just to give a bloody nose to
A
the
bloody
other
nose is what they want to give the elites, to show that, look, you're taking us for granted. You're not in touch with reality. You're not on ground. You're just talking nonsense.
And we hold the ace with our
This
votes.
is our country. We can do what we like. You say we should not vote for him because he's a fool. We'll actually all vote for him because he is a fool. And he will give you guys a good bloody nose on our behalf.
We've seen the rise of hate crime
Yes.
all over the world, not just in America, but especially in America. White supremacy is like it never really went away. It looks like it was just merely suspended for the 8 years that Barack Obama was president of the US. Do you agree with those who say that the main reason Trump won that election was because some people were just disillusioned with a black man being president?
That's partially the case, but you find that, of course, racism never went away. We have all this Black Lives Matter, all these problems with racism. Racism has always been with America. Throughout the Obama years, it continues to be with America. And Obama was actually, a lot of obstacles were placed in his path to achieve the programs he wanted to do based on racism. So racism did not go away. What has happened, as I said, is about this fear, this economic and cultural fear. The demographic changes in America is frightening the racists, what we now call the alt-right. What is this alt-right? The alt-right, alternative right, are not even a properly defined group. They are a conglomerate of different views. Some people who love freedom, some people want to offend, some people who are Islamophobes, some people are anti-feminists, some people are anti-multiculturalists. They are just a bunch of different people saying that all they have in common is the color of their skin. All they have in common, perhaps, is fear of the future. They see prosperous-looking people from other races and even migrants, and they feel
living the good life.
Living the good life. They want that good life, and they feel their skin color and their heritage as Europeans entitles them to a good life, much more, certainly much more than any other color. They will not object, I believe, to an apartheid system that gives them special advantages.
Yes.
And they had a great life. And I remember Chris Rock, the US comedian, made a joke once that although he's a multi-millionaire, because he's black, the poorest white man would never want to change places with him because he has racial advantages that he feels, oh, don't worry, let me just stay where I am.
What they call white privilege.
White privilege.
Yes.
Because let me see where my white privilege will take me. With all your money, you're still a black guy. Anyone can shoot you at any time, you know. Because that's why we have all the problems with gun hate crime. But the truth of the matter is that the alt-right has always been with us. Donald Trump has legitimized what's a fringe group. A year ago, nobody would have ever been able to say that the alt-right would have a voice in the presidency of what is the greatest democracy, the largest economy in the world. It has never happened before. And then we have Steve Bannon as the chief strategist and senior counselor to a Republican president. The world is changing. We're in for interesting times. And it will be very interesting to see in 4 years' time where we'll all be. Because in 4 years' time, we'll be coming to the close of the first Trump term.
Yes.
And if I were to predict, I would say unless the global economy favors him and is incredibly lucky, the odds are that Trump will not be able to control the forces he's unleashing. And he may want to have to walk away from them. He's used them to get to the presidency.
To where he wants.
But I think some of their views may be a bit too extreme from Trump. I don't think Trump, at the heart of it, will want to unleash the forces of this fringe group. Because when hate crime explodes, when there's fighting in the streets, it will imperil his 1% status.
Yes.
All the billionaires. It's very easy to unleash forces to get power. But once you get into power, you now know that the forces of law and order are a lot more important than the forces of nationalism.
Thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you for inviting me.
And thank you for watching. I'm Angela Ajetumobi.